So please be thinking of good questions for this great panel. As Nick mentioned, I'm going to actually start by asking each of you a question and allow you to give a little bit of context on your company, your business. Heather, you're next to me. So I'll start with you from MediaMath. One of the things that I learned in our pre-call was how MediaMath is collecting transparently first-party data. And I'd love for you, as you talk a bit about your role at MediaMath, briefly to also touch on some of the ways in which you're approaching the collection of first-party data and maybe your guiding principles around that.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. I'm Heather Blank. I am the GM of Audiences at MediaMath. We're an omni-channel DSP and DMP. My role there is to head up the data business. And so about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, the powers that be at MediaMath really saw an opportunity to develop a proprietary data business to sit alongside our software to help really power good targeting strategies and performance. And so I joined to help drive and build up that business. And so it really consists of a proprietary data asset that MediaMath has as part of the fuel and exhaust of our media buying activity. We've got about 3 billion profiles globally that we look to really activate in the form of targeting opportunities and insights for our clients. Everybody's in the data business these days, so we really spent a lot of time thinking about how we want to differentiate and really that sits around, it has to drive performance for our clients. And performance comes mostly for us in this sort of way of driving conversion. But we also have branding and other attribution-related performance as well. But really where we focused is finding high-quality data that is unique. And so it is about our proprietary sources. We have a large, some probably, I hate this word, but I'll say it anyways because you guys will completely understand what we have if I say it. We have a large co-op of data. And so we have thousands of advertisers that help to contribute in a transparent way to our data asset, their first-party data. And they do this because if you put data in, you get out the ability to access that data. And so if you think about like the cataloging business of 50 years ago, 100 years ago, it's very similar to that. And so we do it in a very transparent way in the sense of we're transparent to the users as far as how we're using the data, but more importantly, we're transparent to our data partners on how we use their data, keep their data safe, keep it aggregated, keep it anonymous, so they're comfortable in giving us that data asset. We really also focus then on quality over quantity. And so I'm sure the number one targeted segment at MediaMath, and I'm sure it's probably no different for most of the DSPs, DMPs, and probably even the walled gardens out there, is men over 18. So we're targeting half of the population of the world, and we're only doing that at probably about a 50% accuracy rate. So it's really bad targeting that's going on at scale right now because folks are really just looking for numbers. And so we're really trying to focus on whittling down from a scale perspective to really get at quality. And so you can target half as many, a third as many, even a quarter as many people, and still get the type of response rates and demand that you're looking for. And so that's really where we're focused in on around, hey, let's just bring really good data in a transparent and compliant way. And really look at those direct response and performance-driven clients and buyers who want a unique data asset.
Wow, lots of areas we can come back and touch on, absolutely. Thank you. So, Lung, you have had an interesting journey from syndicated research through to transactional data, and now at Merkle you've joined the, what I'll call the people-based data party that's happening. I would love for you to first just admit to everyone that you wish we could just go back to syndicated data because it was so much easier. And then tell us a little bit about your journey that brought you to Merkle and the people-based data opportunity.
I did like the first gentleman who was the CEO of the company. And yeah, all of us that were in traditional media, I was in radio and local, God, I made it. We all made it. I mean, it's like, we're out of it.
Well done.
Yeah, but yet some of us are still sitting here in these type of roles. So I think once you went through the tranches of very stable businesses that you produce the same type of information over and over, there's a certain level of comfortability of it. And I think that is a very easy time, and I think that's also a byproduct of where we're at. I think that uncovering the right signal right now is not saying whatever's convenient. And it pains me that somebody's still using 18 plus. That's definitely not on media math, but that's just on the advertisers. And that's just you. In order to be really data driven, and what attracted me to the role coming from Kroger, which is one of the largest retailers, is that the stakes are high. They're publicly traded, so it's nothing out there that it does 1% free cash flow. I mean, that's an enormous amount of sales. They do 120 billion sales, $12 million worth of goods every hour, and they do 1% free cash flow. So the level of accuracy that we need to have on the media side is very great. So then you transfer this out to other players who may have better profit margins. They really need to do some testing and learning with different types of data, because I definitely believe that an augmented reality, AI will come out here, but AI won't be able to do two things, which is be creative and be empathetic. And under those terms, you have to be really creative when you're trying to say what data is available out there and what's going to be best to move my company forward.
Wow. So, yeah.
So there you go.
Good, rich information. So the question is it even, it's programmatic in terms of transaction, but it's not even realizing the potential of the point of the automation. And so lots still with 18 plus to talk about there. Dominic.
In 2017.
Yeah, right.
In 2017.
Exactly. So a couple questions for you, Dominic. So it's weather company, IBM, Watson. You tell us, how do we sort that all out? And then talk a bit about, I think you mentioned the number 250 million users of your consumer apps and platforms. And so an amazing, at your fingertips, base of customers, people, data. Would help us sort the IBM stuff first, and then tell us about the assets that you have.
Sure. So we're a unique organization. We're a data, an analytic company, technology company, and a publisher at the same time. And the combination of those assets made us attractive to IBM. And they acquired us in February last year. And what's great about the subject and domain that we're in is that weather touches everything, absolutely everything. It influences, and we've understood this, one of the signals that we've extracted from the weather data is how it affects consumers' behavior. From the obvious stuff or not so obvious actually, with ice cream, and people will buy more ice cream with the speed of change of temperature rather than the absolute temperature, and that obviously varies by geography, to the planes taking off behind us. We're involved in all of those operations, which made us attractive to IBM. As it turns out, they also acquired a consumer business, which also has a data exhaust. We're a location company powered by weather, is another way to think of us. And we have an advertising business as well. So we reach CMOs. So the consumer business, Watson advertising, and this data layer all come together to be a rich asset for IBM. For my business, I run the digital business for weather. So if you're getting weather on your phone, you're going to weather.com, chances are, or if you're going to weather.com, chances are it's our product. That was a joke. If you're on your phone, chances are that we are serving the weather through that.
Got it. And 250 million.
Oh, and 250 million, yes. I'm burying the lead there. So we have, because weather touches everything, we have over 250 million monthly active uniques. And that actually spikes in times of active and severe weather. We've just come through kind of an unprecedented hurricane season. We've had two Cat 3 hurricanes hit landfall in the span of a month. We had another Category 1 just last week, and the numbers keep rising. We peaked at 266 million active users last month, which is just incredible. And all of those users are giving us, they're trusting us with their location data because we're giving them the forecast and current conditions, and it's creating a whole bunch of other data sets that we can understand that behavior. And we use that data for two things. One, because we want to be more than a utility provider. We want to be a platform. We want to help people make better decisions. And then the data also allows us to provide value to marketers. So we can get a little more detailed than just male over 18. We can tell you where that group of people are spending their time, a little bit more richness around that data set.
Great. So lots to come back on AI, which Lung brought up, as well as the signals everyone's getting from these data sets, since we are covering the topic of uncovering the signal. Matt, thank you for being here. So you run Nielsen Catalina, and I'd love for you to talk a bit about your organization, and specifically how you're using data to drive measurement, specifically not just for digital, but also offline, and kind of the robustness of cross-channel measurement for your data and your organization.
Great. Thank you. And I am one of your 250 daily users, 266 million users. I'm one of those people that love the weather. So I run Nielsen Catalina Solutions. It's a joint venture between both Nielsen and Catalina, and we provide two principal services: targeting or activation across all different types of platforms and media, as well as measurement. We're probably most well known for our measurement because we have the assets from both Nielsen and Catalina to work with. But we're primarily doing this in just CPG and health and beauty aids. So I watch very closely what the CMOs of those big companies are speaking about, and many of you in the room, probably watch this as well. The measurement, much has been said about the walled gardens today, particularly at the publishers, and we've noticed a pretty significant shift. And I think those walled gardens are open. I don't even think it's a fair term at this point, because they do value measurement. They do want, at the end of the day, the advertiser wants a number that they can trust, and it's really hard to do. The devil's in the details on a lot of this, particularly in digital and mobile, and they've got some bruises. They've got some, war scars from the past couple of years, and there's a trust factor as well that's there. But I'm seeing a great willingness there, to do that and to be open about it and to allow independent measurement in there. But, some of the things, the nice thing about being a little older is, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And a lot of the issues I saw 20 years ago, when we used to call it database marketing or just basic CRM applications about data availability, data coverage, data quality, and whether you can actually use it, they're all here today. The same issues are right in front of us. It's just that they're much more visible, I think, because they're actually much more involved in the serving of advertising. So the stakes are higher. It's tied not just to your FICO score, like in the past, and that can sort of help or ruin your life, but it's tied to how you receive ads. And we'll talk more about control of data and privacy, but the stakes are higher and it's much more visible, because it's being used by people who traditionally didn't have data.
Yeah.
But I applaud what Heather had said as well about the quality over quantity. I think the industry is moving in that direction, but it's still a long putt.
Let's talk more about that. Under this idea of uncovering the signal. I mean, are we actually uncovering the signal? Are we in an era of abundance of data is better, and we have more data than we know what to do with? How are your organizations and your customers harnessing data to really make it actionable? Are they? And I know you brought that up, Heather, so I'll maybe start with you and let you guys jump in.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly, I feel like, are in a state of way more data than what we can consume. And so I think that's a good problem to have, though. I'd rather have that than the opposite. I think, from my perspective, there's a couple of key criteria that we've sort of learned over the years of what's important. Deterministic is one thing that we really, really focus on. So that's another way that we personally differentiate, is we do not have predicted or modeled out attributes or
Not at all.
audiences. Not at all.
Is that different than historically? Had the business historically?
It's not different than Media Math.
No, so it's always been a
It's always
deterministic.
been that way.
Okay.
And so, but we're new, so we've sort of been able to learn from past experience in building up this business. But I think that is key and where we're figuring out. And then we've developed a pretty robust way of vetting signal. And so figuring out, hey, we've got a good baseline. I don't have a performance problem. Like, I don't have data scientists that are working on how to get more performance out of our data. We're working on what more data do we add to raise the bar from where we are. And so our work is really focused on vetting new signal, and we have a pretty standard turnkey way of doing that. And if it increases our performance, great. If it doesn't, we move on to the next thing.
It's interesting. Maybe Lung or Matt, anyone, get your perspective on that point of you don't have a performance problem. Because I would say most marketers that you talk to would say we're constantly focused on how we improve performance. And I'm sure at a Merkle or with Weather's data, NCS, et cetera, what are you hearing? How are you leveraging data? What are your customers saying?
Well, I think it's just evolution. I think a lot of people were probabilistic for a short bit, and then they realized once you measure probabilistic, you can swing either way. The models may be good or bad. And I think a lot of companies such as Merkle and a majority stake ownership by Dentsu, Aegis, and we've really tried to push the needle around people, not proxies. And when you can play in that element, you can definitely gauge yourself a little bit better than saying, well, the model is off. Well, the model will always be off, but actually knowing who the data is coming from. And I think that kind of lends itself to what the whole theme of last year was really around transparency. So when we get into transparency, and I know we'll talk on privacy, but I think having advertisers know where the data is being sourced, how it's being sourced, and how we can measure it, I think that's a very important item, because not every time will you get your measurement back and you'll be like, yeah, this is great. I mean, if you can, that, more power to you, but more times than not, there are going to be learnings, and how you create that performance out of that really matters. And I think the other big theme that at least we're seeing here at Merkle is global. Right now, every major pitch out there, and, Dentsu was able to win majority of the Anheuser-Busch business. And I can guarantee you that a lot of that work and all the agencies that are pitching it, it's around data. What data can you move into second or third world countries? I know we're sitting here in the U.S. and Media Math and others, and we are global businesses. And when you start thinking about the global footprint and what data availability you'll have out there, I think that's what's really going to be crucial, and it's a really good time to be in data, because there is a lot of data, but I don't think we've kind of exhausted all the necessary off-the-shelf data sources. I think we're going to be ushering a new era of data being created and data being personal. So I think that's ultimately what we're going to really start seeing in the next few years.
Yeah.
The challenge that we see is two sides of a coin. Like, one, from a targeting and measurement standpoint, I can't get enough data, right? Like, if I'm going to serve males aged 18 to 35 in the market for a car when it's a sunny day on Saturday afternoon in a particular number of zip codes, you start to get a very large data set whittled down to much smaller sets. So the more data that you have and from a targeting and measurement perspective is certainly helpful. On the flip side, the analysis and the actual processing of that data is a real challenge. You need data scientists. And you need lots of them. You need compute power, which also takes time, and we can throw more servers.
Doesn't Watson just do all that for you?
Well, thank you for the segue.
Well,
yeah, I mean, so what we're exploring, and what's really interesting, and I think where we talk about machine learning, and we miss the point maybe, is with the ability for a computer to understand natural language and take a query and then process that on your behalf. It's like, Watson, show me last week's sales and compare that to last year's, and show me any anomalies. Like, that's a question you'd give to a data scientist. With all of this data that we have now, that's a kind of machine learning and artificial intelligence you want to be able to have just to cut through that volume and interpret something.
Yeah. So Matt, one of the things that you brought up as it relates to marketers leveraging data is that a lot of marketers, you'll read this in the headlines, as they feel let down by the data. Is the data that they're paying a lot for, arguably, actually delivering them the audiences that they believe that they're getting. And I feel like coming off the ANA, you can't help but see all the headlines around that, and P&G pulls, 100 million and, sales go up. And so maybe all that data hasn't been worth it, or, we've been reaching people that aren't, bots, et cetera, fraud.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on that in particular as it relates to the integrity of the data and the audience that supposedly is underneath it?
And much has been said about it, and some CMOs, I think it was Mark Pritchard that said we spent $600 billion over the past 10 years in digital advertising, and our brands aren't growing. So that catches everybody's attention, particularly when they pull back on their spend. But like what Dominic was saying about, the willingness to, and Heather was saying it as well, you can have scale. If they want scale, and, and their agency, is convincing them or working with them. I'm not trying to blame the agency by any means, that you have to reach this many impressions, that you are going to go for scale, and you're just not going to have the quality of it all. The availability is not there. And then at the same time, they expect to pay the CPM that they normally had, and we see it. We see, what reach they want, but in the end of the day, you're going to have to prove the return on investment. You're going to have to prove, did it drive more sales of Starbucks, or did it drive more Toyotas? Because that's what they all want, and I think what that's going to come down to, are probably more, it's like a windshield wiper. It's going back and forth. We're back to TV. We're still going to spend, but I still see them spending in digital. So we know that it's like we're in the third inning. We're still trying to figure it all out. But you're only sort of, Lung was talking about this, you're only sort of as strong as, the weakest link along the chain. There's so many steps that you take. You might start with really great seed data, and the data scientists or the marketing specialists in the room understand this. But then you're creating a segment. Then are you activating with a direct match, or are you going, with a cookie match? How well does the DSP do it? Is all the DMPs I'm on, are they really, scaling my segments or onboarding them appropriately? So that's where the details, you have to be responsible as a marketer or as a data scientist or as an agency to know those quality factors, because that really impacts the campaign.
So is it a human problem? Is it that all the data is great, but we humans just can't figure out how to use it? Or?
It's both. I wish I could say that we had much greater strides with AI. I think we're just scratching the surface on machine-based learning. Programmatic, 5-7 years ago was automation. It was not AI, and we all are suffering probably from the consequences of that. But you have to have the judgment. You have to, sometimes I look at, studies or data that's about to go, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. There's something wrong here. So we are not at a point, where we can show variation on what a campaign should do that a human is not looking at it.
Yeah.
So we're still there.
So many of you brought up, of course, data privacy and the integrity and how we're sourcing data. Right before we took the stage, we heard, media is data, and guess what? Rules and regulations are coming. I'm sure all of you in your organizations see that, are part of the voice in the industry driving that, and are also getting ahead of it. I'd love for some of you to comment, Merkle, whether all these different great businesses that are leveraging data at real scale in those cases, not just in the U.S. where it still tends to be a bit easier in the space, but as we look at GDPR and some of the other implications around the world.
Yeah, I maybe kick us off there. We're actually really excited about GDPR, and we want to take a leadership position. I mean, we value our audience, our fan base. Our job is to keep them safe and keep them informed, and make sure they're out of harm's way, as well as providing light entertainment when it's a sunny day. So we're leaning into GDPR, and we're excited about that because we see it's an opportunity to create a stronger trust and bond with the consumer. And for us, one of the data signals that we get is location, and we're very protective of that. It's very personal information, and
all opt-in.
All opt-in, yeah. Compared to some other applications, does your crossword puzzle really need your location data? All they're doing is selling it on the exchanges. So we're super excited about GDPR, and we want to make sure that there's this value. We always talk about the value exchange. And so as we work from being a utility over to being a platform to help people make better decisions, I think that's a real opportunity, and to leverage that trust and to build on that and provide real value exchange there.
I would agree. I think the two people, besides a few of us who, when you get into GDPR, are happy about it, are the legal teams in the UK and the EU. I mean, you talk about bills, and that's where it gets on scale. Is like a lot of companies won't be able to participate. They'll just kind of fall to the side, because the basic tenet for those who don't know GDPR, and I boil it down to three things. Do you have consent for the data? And if you're buying it from somebody, do you have their consent from the data originators? Do you have an ability to forget them if they need to? Are you going to be good stewards of their data? So if they would like to be forgotten, what process do you have if you're buying this data through another data company? And the last one is the data security portion. So are you going to be protecting their data? Do you have the proper steps in place if that happens? And this doesn't get launched until May of next year, starting in the UK, and then the rest of the EU will probably follow suit soon after. But I think when you look at that, those are very easy things. These are nothing to be scared of, but it's something that I guess in the US, if we really sat down and said, yes, we're going to be all doing these things, I think all of us would be like, all right, great, we'll enact this now. But I don't think anyone wants to hire a whole bunch of lawyers in the U.S. right now. So,
but it does touch U.S. companies, because you're obligated, even if it's a EU citizen coming in from the outside to your systems, there's an obligation to satisfy those requirements. So there is an obligation there, and I think you'll see bottom feeders fall out. Like you said, you can't just keep up with those requirements, and there are stiff penalties. It's like 20% of your annual revenue, and for a company like IBM, that's a significant penalty. So we take it very seriously. My hope is that it removes the bottom feeder. We're able to build trust with consumers.
Yeah.
It's going to initially, though, cause a lot. It's going to cost more up front. Remember there was do not call, and the new do not call list, and all the work you had to do around that. This is probably that times 5. The stakes are much higher. So nobody wants to be Equifax, in a situation like that. And it's funny, in the Times last week, there was a great article about people really calling Equifax in droves saying, I want out. So if you're I'm not in financial services, but if you're in financial services, that's a big issue. Because they rely on the FICO score from all three, and now if the erosion of that quality of that data is going to have an impact across the industry, and the consumer, the business opportunity is who helps consumers manage their data, because it's much more than stripping your cookies, or it's much more than your identity. It's managing your identity, And I think there are great strides forward from companies out there who are trying to protect identity, and probably work that MediaMath is doing as well. And certainly Nielsen has a huge stake in this, as does Catalina, both my parents, and I think they're handling it well. But it's not going to be a small thing, It's going to require relooking. It's like Sarbanes-Oxley is back, but now it's around privacy.
That's a good quote. MediaMath, specifically around mobile data, something you brought up, which is so much of time spent now is in mobile. A lot of the data is in mobile. The cookie is not really a viable solution. How are you guys? How have you built for the modern kind of business people based?
Yeah, we're definitely spending a lot of time in that area. What has been traditionally based off of like a cookie asset, the consumers are spending less and less time in that area, so the signal is depleting there, and so really focused on mobile. I think mobile has so much data there. There is the creepiness factor that was really a cookie concern when we all got into this years and years ago. Like, oh my gosh, you saw what site I went to, and now you're going to send me an ad about it. Now the average consumer, measured by my dad, doesn't even care about that anymore. And so I think we'll get to a different level of acceptance from the user. But as measured by my dad, he went to recently went to the hospital for a checkup, and then was getting ads, and he did not log on with anything. He just had his phone there, and then he was getting ads targeted to him about getting a job at that hospital. And so, with his limited ability of understanding what I do for a living, I actually gave him credit that he could figure this out. He's like, how did they know? And I think I explained, well, they're probably using location data. And I think there is an element of location data is rich. There's definitely good signal in there. There's definitely enough scale to be deterministic at this point. But there is an onus on us as the managers and curators of that data to do it in a smart way that doesn't invade people's privacy, creep people out, but still drive good results.
It's interesting. Most recently, and I'll open up to the audience for questions, we were working with Foursquare on data, and for a B2B client in kind of the food segment, we wanted to target restaurant owners. And we actually could look at phones that went into those locations a certain number of times per week to identify whether we thought they work there versus, I suppose if someone really loved the restaurant and went 5 days a week, but you're absolutely right, the way those signals are now being used.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Something like the fact that one of a really high-performing segment that we see at MediaMath is new home buyers. So people are always, if you guys deal in that vertical, it's very hard to identify people who are about to buy a home or move. And so there's companies that have basically geofenced every single open house in the U.S. And when you visit those locations, you now are in that segment. That's a deterministic, 100% high-performing segment. But what's the creep-out factor there, right? And so that's the balance there that we're struggling with.
Right.
And I look forward to when location isn't the catch-all, be-all. Listen, mobile location data is hot. It is because, and everyone's using for attribution, for intent data, but this goes back to it. It's going to be, the 2.0 of it is going to be much richer, and I kind of look forward to that.
Amazing panel. Thanks so much to all of you and this great audience with great questions.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated. Thank you.